Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Strategy International podcast. This is the podcast produced for Strategy International, a global think tank and a consulting firm that brings together great minds from all over the world that come together, they analyze, they discuss, and they collaborate on issues of global interest such as international policy, economy, defense, strategy, the environment, and much, much more. We have another great guest today with us, Viktoria Bodnarova. She is the regional coordinator and outreach liaison for the EURAXESS Latin America and Caribbean, as well as the EURAXESS Worldwide. We're going to get to that in just a second. Very interesting. We'll get to know exactly what EURAXESS is, the mission, and all the wonderful things that they do over there. In the meantime, you can head on over to strategyinternational.org to check out all the beautiful things happening over at Strategy International, all the back catalog of podcasts and other productions, and other valuable information as well. Viktoria, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Hi, George. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today with you.
Thank you for coming on. And I understand that you're in Colombia. How are things in Colombia?
Yes, exactly. I'm in Colombia, and everyone thinks when I say that I live in Colombia, how such a beautiful weather every day and sunshine, and I must be almost every day on the beach. But unfortunately, it's not like that, because then I say I live in Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia. And that's one of the only places in Colombia where it's never hot. It's kind of coolish. Every day of the year, we have between 11 and 15 degrees Celsius. We are on the mountain, 2,800 meters high. So it rains a lot. So definitely need a jacket every day if you want to go out.
We're going to get to a little bit what you do because I find it fascinating. Last episode, for the people listening, we went into detail about the European legal framework, specifically the European Commission. And on this episode, we're going to go a little bit more of a micro approach into a specific kind of program that stems from the European Commission, which is EURAXESS. And we're going to get to learn a little bit about it and what it does. Because to be honest with you, it's the first time I hear about this program, and certainly there are others out there listening or watching that are hearing about this for the very first time as well. Tell us a little bit about EURAXESS, and then we're gonna get into the details.
Absolutely, I will be happy to tell you about EURAXESS. That, you know, it's a name that doesn't ring a bell to a lot of people. Obviously, the European Commission, the European Union, everyone knows about those terms. But when it comes to EURAXESS, they're like, you know, what that is, why that word, you know, who came up with this. But at the end of the day, you know, it actually means access to Europe. So that's how we came up with the word EURAXESS. And it's a European Commission's initiative from the Directorate General for Research and Innovation that really provides information to the researchers, to the research community, to universities, research institutions about fellowships, grants, opportunities to finance their mobility stays, their research careers, and also collaborative projects. So it's basically an initiative, a project that was born almost 20 years ago. Next year, we are going to celebrate the 20th anniversary. And when it was born, the name was a little bit different. It was called EURALink, but now it's EURAXESS. And basically, at the time when it was born, you know, the researchers were telling us, okay, we want a place, we want a platform where we can find information about all these jobs and funding opportunities. And we can also find information about visas and where to find schools for our children, administrative issues that everyone needs when they are especially moving from one country to another. So that's when the European Commission said, okay, we do have funding for research, but we also need these intermediaries, right? We also need these platforms that can really help researchers. Therefore, we created, at the end of the day, this one-stop shop that the European Commission likes to call it, which has two arms. It has the European arm and the international arm, right? And when it was born, it was the European. Right now, we have offices or so-called EURAXESS service centers in 43 European countries, where my colleagues, what they offer is information about practical information, about, as I mentioned, where to find accommodation, information about social security, health insurance, legal issues, visas, work permits. So that's what my colleagues in Europe do. And us outside of Europe, where we are based in 9 global hubs around the world, our mission, our objective is a little bit different, as we are much smaller than the group of colleagues in Europe. So our mission is really to provide information about funding opportunities to these researchers and what kind of fellowships and grants they can find within the European countries. So just a little bit in a nutshell.
You know what I find fascinating, because there's kind of like a diplomatic aspect to this, and the way that you're describing it is as though it's a service for citizens that want to leave Europe and settle elsewhere outside of Europe. And you would imagine that the first stop would be to, whichever country's embassy in the respective country that these people are from, where normally one would go and get all sorts of information, especially with respect to the social security and visas and that sort of thing. And it's fascinating to me that through the European Union, you have kind of these satellite offices that kind of assist, and they're actually located all over the world. And I found that kind of unique in a way, because that doesn't exist, or at least not that I know of. For example, where I'm from in Canada, I don't think any other country all over the world has like an office like this to facilitate academics or professionals that want to, to be mobile and to travel and to relocate around the world.
That's true. That's very true. And I think that now that we are almost 20 years old, the initiative and the project has become quite known within Europe and outside Europe, although we struggle every day to promote our services and information because, of course, there is so much out there. But something comparable, something that could be really similar, what we do, it's really, as you say, really hard to find, because we are very specified in terms of our target audience, right? Like we really have specific information for researchers, professors, PhD students, postdocs. So we really specialize to a certain group of people. We are not here for everyone, which also makes our services unique. And honestly speaking, what you just mentioned, those services that we provide that are completely free of charge. At the end of the day, we don't cover if a researcher comes to our office or to our welcome center and then they ask for information. We provide that type of services completely free. So going from outside of Europe towards Europe, or from another Europe, from within Europe, my colleagues offer that information, as you just said, because we have over 800 people that work in these 43 countries within Europe. So it's quite a big EURAXESS family. But then on the other hand, outside Europe, we are a very small team. We are only 18 in the 9 different global hubs. Therefore, we don't provide the same information, unfortunately. It would be wonderful to have 5-6 people in every single office in the world, so we can do the same vice versa, as my colleagues in Europe offer that information, practical information, We couldn't do that because of the lack of personnel, which I hope that it will increase at some point. So what we do is really, inform all the people that are here in our countries about the funding opportunities that Europe offers. But still, it's a very large scale.
Why limit yourselves only to researchers or to, from what I understand, mostly like, the field of academia? Is there a reason specifically for that, or that's just how it's been designed?
The reason is because we were born within the DG, or as they call it, the Directorate General for Research and Innovation of the European Commission.
Yeah.
That's where we were basically created. And that's where the actual niche was. That's where the need was. Because when we look at, for example, more towards like bachelor's or master students, they are part of the DG Education, because there is another Directorate General within the European Commission that deals with education, culture, and youth, which would be obviously the place where the grants for masters and bachelors are provided. So they had already these offices, or especially the alumni network of the so-called Erasmus Plus, that I'm sure that you've already heard of, and also our audience, because it's a program which is well known. So they do have a big alumni association around the world where they provide this information to the students that would like to do a bachelor or master degree. So where really, the information was missing was actually this specific target group, the researchers, the family members of the researchers, the professors, and the higher, basically, level investigators that we cover.
I want to go a little off topic here, because someone by the name of Viktoria Bodnarova that ends up in Latin America, I mean, you don't hear about this very often. So I just want to know how you ended up in Colombia, and if this was something that you were looking forward to, or what happened. How did you evolve professionally to get interested in this sort of field?
Yeah, I mean, my trajectory has been, or is, quite interesting and quite something, to be honest with you. I think we would need an additional podcast to talk about everything. But just to give you an idea, I was born in a tiny village in the southeast part of Slovakia, which actually has about 500 people. So it's really tiny. When I say to people here in Bogota that I'm from a village from 500 people, they say, well, that's just a little corner of Bogota.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Having 10 million people here. So it's definitely very small. And I guess, I was quite ambitious, and I was a child that wanted to explore and discover. Therefore, I decided to leave Slovakia and embark on a very international journey. And I left when I was already 16, and I've done some studies in the US. Then I came back, and then I did my university in Prague, in the Czech Republic. So that was already also a step outside my homeland. And from there, where I studied international relations and European studies, of course, it led me towards this international journey just by its name. And I was very fascinated at the time by the European Union, by all its organs, right? The Parliament, the Council, the Commission. And I just thought, wow, one day I would love to work in, for, or with the European Union. And at the end of the day, that dream of a little girl actually came true. But I had to work a lot, and the journey wasn't easy. It wasn't without obstacles, and it wasn't without things up and down, of course. But I did quite a lot of exchange programs as well throughout my studies. I've studied in the UK, in Canada, in France. And of course, I finished my master's degree in Prague. And after my studies, I started working for the Czech Academy of Sciences. So they, I would say, literally handpicked me from my master studies, and I started working for its Department of Projects and Grants. So this was kind of a natural continuation of my studies. I remember when I was finishing my master's degree, the rector of the university called me into his office, and he's like, Victoria, you're one of our best students. I would like you to continue your doctoral degree because we just opened a new program. And I told him, Mr. Rector, I would love that, but under one condition. If I don't find a job within the next 3 months, I promise I will come back and continue my PhD studies. So as you can see, I'm not a doctor, so that never happened. So I found a job. Of course, nothing says that it cannot happen ever, because it's never say never. But that was a little conversation that I had with my rector before starting the position at the Czech Academy of Sciences, where I started managing both national, international, European projects. And it's very interesting how life and where it takes you, because as I said, I'm not a doctoral student, or I don't have a doctoral degree. I never really aspired to be a researcher, but all of a sudden, from almost nowhere, I get to work with the researchers, right? And it's like, you attract things at the end of the day. And I started working with them, and I started working with their career development, with the mobility of researchers. We had a welcome center in Prague where I was welcoming researchers from around the world and helping them with going to the foreign police to get their visas, going to a bank, opening a bank account, looking for schools for children because they just arrived and they had no idea where to find a kindergarten, a school. I worked with the ministries, with the local departments. So it was a little bit of everything. And I really enjoyed that, because it was this direct connection with the human being, right? With the researcher, who at the end of the day is, a huge intellectual, a very intelligent person. And then they come to your office because they need help with all that bureaucracy and administrative issues, and of course the language, right? I mean, while I was at school, I learned Czech, although it's not that different from Slovak, but still, it has its differences. And then, I went with them to these offices so I can translate and I can help them just make their life a little bit easier and make them welcome in a new country, in their new home. And from there, I already started learning about EURAXESS and getting to know about the project, which is a European one and still is. And I said after 5 years of working in Prague, I said, I think I still need to embark on a different journey and need to be a tiny bit more international. And I was very much interested in the global arm, and the international arm of EURAXESS. And there was an opening for leading the office in North America. I applied and I got the position, and that was back in 2013. So that was my first kind of big move from Europe to the US. I was the director of the office of EURAXESS North America, which dealt with the US and Canada. And I stayed there for 7 years in total. And after that, EURAXESS Global decided to open an office in Mexico to lead Latin America and the Caribbean. And that's where, my first jump from north to the south happened back in 2020. And after 2 years of being in Mexico, the office was moved to Colombia, where I am right now.
Tell me that first of all, that's a that's a fascinating story, and it's great to see how people are connected in this world that just keeps getting closer and closer, right, with the technology that's available. And to me, these are the stories that I love asking people, just to know a little bit about their background and the steps, the different steps that got them to whatever stage in their life. Let's go back to EURAXESS now. In your opinion, based on what you've seen, is there more people that are coming from your region towards Europe, or are there people leaving Europe towards the region that you're in?
When I was in North America, it was more Europeans going towards North America, especially the US, but also to Canada.
Hmm.
So that was a trend that I was, of course, looking at and observing throughout the years that I was there. Although the programs, the grants and the fellowships that we offer through the European Union are, of course, the other way around, right? It's for the Americans, for the Canadians, for any nationality going towards Europe. But now, being in Latin America and Caribbean almost for 4 years and being able to also live in two different countries, the region is huge, right? I mean, we are talking about more than 30 countries that constitute the Latin American and the Caribbean region. And the countries are different, right? They have a different life standard. They have different ways of life. But at the end of the day, looking at the mobility flows, this is the contrary, right? So here we are looking at more Latinos or more Latin American researchers and students going towards Europe than vice versa. But this is also a little bit a part of my objective, and I hope that we'll be able to balance it a little bit more in the years to come, so we can get more or less to the same level with all the different fellowships and the opportunities that we offer. And of course, we have to make available these countries to the Europeans. We have to let them know that these countries are open. They have a wonderful infrastructure, a huge biodiversity, that these countries are not only touristic destinations, but also destinations where they can have very high-end education and research facilities.
Is it working? Are you seeing any progress in that? Because I'm imagining that perhaps the political stability in certain countries might play a role in that. How do you see it?
Yeah, the political stability, I think it might not change very soon, to be honest with you. It has been the case for many years, and it's very difficult to get out of that, given the history of all the countries here in Latin America. But I think that we have to focus on the positive side, right? We have to focus on the growth of the research infrastructures within these countries. We have to focus on the collaboration, the different investment that the EU has in these countries and vice versa. The Latin American countries have really a lot of SMEs, a lot of startups that are dealing with innovation, with artificial intelligence. Of course, they are doing a lot of research in biodiversity, in climate change, oceans, the Amazon, right, which is, of course, the lungs of the whole world, and it's here on the continent. But I can say that throughout at least my presence here, throughout the last 4 years, I can see that there's a little bit of rise from Europeans towards Latin America in terms of interest, in terms of willingness to collaborate in research and innovation projects between European partners and Latin American partners, and also in the minds of the individual researchers that they would like to come and work in the different teams. Or of course, when there is already, like, let's say, European professor teaching at a university here, so that's a huge help, because through these Europeans, these European professors and scientists, we can make it more available, and we can have them as testimonials as examples of Europeans that have gone through different projects, have come to Latin America, and have been able to also create connections, have publications, co-publications, and create really good research.
You know, in the communications that we were exchanging before the recording, you mentioned something about an EU CELAC summit. What is that exactly? And you know, what role does that play in what you do there in that region?
So I'm actually very, very excited for this summit, and that happened this July, 2023, in Brussels, where the heads of states from Latin America and Caribbean were invited to this high-level summit to Brussels to meet with their counterparts from Europe. And this is really a gathering which happened the last time 8 years ago. You know, so this was almost a historic step, and I think it also has to do with the Spanish presidency of the European Council that is taking place right now. It started the 1st of July, and it will last until the end of December. And of course, you know, as you know, the relations between Spain and Latin America historically has been very, very strong, not only because of the language. And I think that one of the impulses of the EU to really hold this summit was the Spanish presidency. And I'm hoping that really this summit will continue, and it will not happen again 8 years later, but they are talking about in 2 years, which would be obviously a really good timing, because these heads of states, they need to meet. We need to really strengthen this cooperation that has been done already a long time ago, and we have so many ties between each other, right? I mean, really, Latin America and Europe are, so to speak, natural partners, because we are united with unique cultural and historical links, deep economic and social ties, and really the kind of the joint commitment to peace and multilateralism that we have between the two continents. So I think that there might have been in the past 8 years a little bit of slowdown in the relation between the two continents, also because we have not been able to have this high-level summit in the past 8 years. But I'm really hoping that as natural partners, as we are, we will be able to not only pick up where we left off, but also start and invest into new projects, new collaborations, and really new ideas that can emerge from the collaboration between the two parts.
So you believe that the fact that you have all the heads of states, or maybe most of the heads of states from Latin America and Europe, this will kind of stimulate the interest of either people coming to Latin America or people from Latin America getting interested in Europe?
Yes, that's what I believe, because also there is a new initiative, I don't know if you've heard about that, from the European Commission, which is called the Global Gateway. This came out literally at the end of 2022, so it's been not even a year. And through this Global Gateway investment, which has about 45 billion euros, we would like to also invest into the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. And we are talking, you know, about projects, for example, digital connectivity, the Digital Alliance. We are talking about projects that has to do with space, such as the big European project Copernicus and Galileo, that have a huge presence in Latin America and the Caribbean. We would like to really help through this initiative and through different smaller projects that can be implemented in Latin America, so we can really help life and connect with the society, both in Latin America and Europe.
Now, as a liaison officer, I'm assuming that you're pretty well connected, or at least constantly networking with either, local universities or research institutes, the academia field, not only in Colombia, but pretty much everywhere in Latin America. Is that part of the job? I mean, are you expected to kind of know where to redirect the individuals that are interested in research in a given topic, or to study in a given school or university? Like, you have to be aware of all these programs and be in contact with these institutions or people?
So it's a good point, because I haven't actually mentioned that before as the EURAXESS Worldwide Outreach Liaison, which is my other hat, because the one is the regional coordinator for EURAXESS Latin America and the Caribbean, and the other one is what you just mentioned. Basically the role as an outreach liaison for the EURAXESS Worldwide Network is to connect all my colleagues. As I mentioned, we are in 9 different global hubs around the world, but we are only 18, so it's a smaller international family. Therefore, I try to connect with them. I look into the different events that they do. I try to support them, mentor sometimes the colleagues that are younger or not as experienced, or they are not with the project for that long. I'm looking for synergies in between the different events and activities that the global hubs do. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we can perhaps, help each other throughout the different initiatives that we do. Because of course, it's not, a one thing, fits all, unfortunately, or one size fits all. Because what works, for example, in the US, probably might not work in China, or what works in Japan might not work in Brazil or Colombia. Mm-hmm. So we need to work in a very harmonized way, but at the same time have the liberty and the flexibility to create our own events and our own missions and our own activities on the ground, on the field, because we are on the field. And we give a lot of feedback to the European Commission, especially to our colleagues at DG Research and Innovation, about everything, about the research landscape, about what's happening within the governments of the countries where we live in. As you mentioned, many of them might not be as stable as some of the European governments. So we give a lot of feedback and input from the field. And also, of course, as we work with the European Union funded projects such as the Marie Curie, the European Research Council, Horizon Europe. So I am also connecting all of my colleagues to these programs, the European programs. So basically the colleagues from Brussels, to be able to have, for example, speakers when they need for their webinars or for the events. So it's a little bit of that backup and that additional help of someone who is there to connect, to follow up, and to really liaise in between the worldwide hubs and Europe.
Tell me something a little bit more on a political kind of context now, given the challenges that we're seeing right now in Europe. Obviously, the geopolitical ones, trade, economy. The fact that you are, working in this EU-funded kind of organization, is there a fear that significant funds may be kind of reoriented elsewhere to support other initiatives? And is that a challenge that you always have to have kind of in the back of your mind? Are we going to have enough to do our own projects, given the actual, on the ground reality that a lot of Europeans are facing?
Right. I still believe, and sometimes I might be naive, but I do sometimes live in a world that, in my opinion, could be better. But sometimes it's good to be positive and think about the things that can work instead of the things that cannot work, or how we can make it happen and not how we cannot make it happen. Therefore, I really appreciate the framework programs that the European Union has for research and innovation, right? Currently, we are in the 9th framework program, which is called Horizon Europe. And that program started back in 2021, and it has a duration of 7 years until December 2027. And this program has a budget of 95.5 billion euros for the period of 7 years, which basically offers funding opportunities both to individual researchers and also to research institutions that would like to collaborate and enter into, as we call them, consortia with different European partners and really, researching different themes and topics that are important and that are really the global challenges that we face as a global society. And that is the budget that, of course, has been set probably a year before the current framework program started. It's a budget that has to go through all the different organs of the European Union, and it was fought for with blood almost, I would say, because it's the biggest budget we have ever had. The previous framework program, which was the 8th, and it was called Horizon 2020, it had a 70 billion euro budget for 7 years, and now we have almost 100 billion.
Wow.
So with that, I think we can also show the interest from the European side to invest into research, innovation, and technology, to create new opportunities, to create new collaborations with European partners and non-European partners, and really looking for synergies with the partners that really share the same or similar values that we have within Europe, and we have some sort of mutual interests, right, in really tackling these global challenges. And that budget, I really hope that until now, we've done almost 3 years since the new framework program started, and it has not been touched, despite of all the difficulties that are happening both in Europe and in the world. I have not heard of any cuts within this budget, and I'm hoping that really these 7 years that have been set almost in stone when it comes to the direction of these projects, the different themes and research areas, and the budget itself, that it will last until the end, until 2027, and that the Commission will really, comply with this promise of the budget until the end of the framework program.
Tell me something, because I've been thinking a lot, like while we're having this discussion about, individuals, professors, academics, professionals that want to relocate, for example, in Latin America or in South America. And again, I just want to go back to that political context, because like you mentioned, I'm sure it's nice and beautiful, but we can't really state that there are stable democracies like there are in Europe, in Latin America or in South America. I'm just curious to know the individuals or professionals or whatever, the academics that decide to relocate and end up, for example, in Venezuela or in countries that have shaky political foundations. What happens at that point in time where either it's no longer safe or their mission has no significant purpose anymore because of the local politics? We saw recently with the election of the new president in Brazil that took kind of a different approach internationally. So far, there haven't been any noticeable repercussions, but who knows? It's still a new government. What happens in these situations? Are you at all kind of looking out for these sort of details, where to send someone? Is it safe? Is there longevity in the work or the mission that they're seeking? Are you at all kind of looking into these aspects?
Well, I think that one of the really bases or foundations for the international cooperation in research, innovation, technology between Europe and Latin America is based through something that we call science and technology agreements. And these agreements, for example, are so far signed only with 4 Latin American countries. It's Mexico, Chile, Argentina, and Brazil.
Okay.
These S&T agreements have been signed a long time ago. Of course, they have been signed because there were mutual interests. There were a lot of different collaborative projects. There was also a quite high number of researchers that were mobile between Europe and these countries. Nevertheless, there are some other countries that are popping up, so to speak, within LUC, that offer nowadays a very safe and very high-end research infrastructure, where really researchers can work freely and work in an environment that is basically safe, and it's good for them to be there and share with the researchers. Some of those countries, I would say, would be Colombia, for example, where I am right now. It could be also Panama and Costa Rica from Central America. It could also be Peru, because also the collaboration with Peru has gone higher. So, of course, there are countries that are very unstable right now. And I think that those countries do not even offer, that many opportunities. You don't see those openings through the websites. You don't see the governments of these countries offering, for example, grants or fellowships to the researchers to come. You don't see that those countries are really trying to attract researchers from outside, because they know that they are struggling within their own country, and they would need to kind of get to some point of stability before they can really open up and offer sort of a harmonized relationship and a cooperation. So far, as long as I'm here, or I have been here for the past 3.5 years, I have not experienced anything tragic. Fortunately, I hope I will not. That it will stay like this. Of course, we have, the usual suspects, the research institutions, the universities that welcome the highest number of researchers in Mexico, in Colombia, in Brazil, in Chile, and Argentina. But I think that the projects are quite flexible, that are funded especially by the European Union. Also, we could see that, during the pandemic, where a lot of people could not do field work. Right, they could not travel, they could not go to their labs, or they could not do these mobility stays, which are normally part of these research projects. So the European Commission was able to postpone them and to give them this additional space, time, and also postpone the budget, so they can actually, kind of get to that commitment that they proposed when they wrote the proposal. So I think that that's also a very good sign from the Commission that if a pandemic, again, hopefully not, happens, or if there is a difficult situation in these countries and they cannot really use all those funds, and they cannot comply with all the proposed milestones and objectives within the project, that there is really that flexibility from the EU to help them either come back to Europe or to postpone their stay and start a little bit later.
Right. Tell me a little bit. I mean, obviously, you've been doing this for a very long time. The program has existed, you mentioned for 20 years now. What are some success stories, or some examples of researchers who have been, who have benefited from this program?
So I actually see it here. I don't want to say on a daily basis, because this doesn't really happen on the daily basis. But I can see the results every year, or maybe every 6 months. Of course, us as the coordinators, as the regional representatives of EURAXESS, we deal with extremely big regions, very big populations. We have an office, for example, in India with 2 people. We have an office in China with 2 people. We have an office in North America with 2 people, and also in Latin America and Caribbean. We have an office, one in Brazil and in Colombia. So we are also only 2 people for the entire region. Therefore, it is a little bit difficult to map all these success stories, right? Because we are the messengers, right? We are the intermediaries. We are the people that tell you how and where to find opportunities for your research in Europe. Right. We tell you how to apply. We tell you what are the eligibility criteria. We tell you what are the programs, what are the grants, How can you apply? We bring you webinars and information sessions with the experts that really, you know, explain to you step by step how to apply. We offer, for example, also practical sessions, hands-on webinars or sessions to the researchers where they can learn a lot more beyond theory. And most of the time, when we do these sessions, both virtual and in person, we like to invite testimonials. You know, those are our success stories. Those are the researchers that have gone through the process. They are, you know, flesh and blood and bones. So they're actual people, and they come from the countries where we are based. And those for us are extremely important, because especially here in Latin America and the Caribbean, there is, what I have seen in the past, there's really lack of motivation. You know, people really think that they cannot get there, that it's not for them, that they can't achieve it. So it's usually, you know, this negative collocation or negative thinking that, oh my God, this is a high-end, innovative, excellent project or grant. And they're like, well, but I come from Colombia, I'm not good enough. Or I come from Bolivia or Ecuador, and I can't apply because it's not for me. So we are not only passing on information about funding opportunities, but we are also little motivators, right? We try to show these researchers that it's possible. Therefore, we bring all these people that have done, and they have been successful in getting these European projects, so they can actually see them. And every call that comes out for a PhD or for a postdoc or for, you know, grants that are for more experienced researchers, and when we get the results from the commission and we see that those results contain a researcher from our region, from our country, so we almost pop a champagne because we are very excited about the fact that these people appear on those lists more and more, and we can see more Colombian, Brazilian, Argentinian researchers gaining and being successful in these calls. Therefore, you know, we are very happy when we find out about that. So for us, every little success, every person, every researcher that comes from our region and gains a grant is basically a little success towards even a bigger one.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to wrap it up there, but you know, looking ahead now, what are EURAXESS's goals? You know, the aspirations for the future. You know, in terms of supporting the researchers and in terms of, you know, enhancing European, you know, research collaboration.
So when EURAXESS started, and for many, many years, almost I would say 18 years out of 20, we have been focusing on the individual. We have been focusing on the mobility grants, as we call them, right? Fellowships for individual researchers, such as the ones that would like to do a full PhD, researchers that want to do a postdoc, or researchers that would like to already have their own lab and have that independence in terms of research, and they don't need a supervisor anymore, but they would like to be more autonomous. So we were providing information, especially to individual researchers. That was really the biggest objective and the biggest task of EURAXESS in the past. And as of last year, we have shifted a little bit, or rather added another component, and that is the collaboration. Because as we mentioned, you know, Horizon Europe does not only offer grants for individual researchers, moreover, it does offer funding for collaborative projects that are really aiming to tackle these global challenges of the world. And that would be basically the future of EURAXESS as well, right? So, of course, not to forget about the individual, but also promote these opportunities that are available for collaborative projects, where we are looking into collaboration with research institutions, with companies, with NGOs, with hospitals, with startups. We would like to collaborate both with the academic and non-academic sector and look into those really big missions and big challenges that the world is facing today, because, you know, alone we cannot do that. Europe as a continent cannot tackle all these challenges because, as we mentioned, they're global, they are worldwide. And we are talking about oceans and soil and cancer and climate change and smart cities, right? So each of those international partners based in our worldwide hubs can add perhaps somehow, either with expertise, with their know-how, with knowledge, with researchers, or with, of course, geographical entourage to these projects that we would like to have in the future. So I'm hoping that us as EURAXESS, in the small team that we are, we can put a little grain of the sand towards tackling these global challenges, so we can have, you know, bigger impact on the world and towards a better society.
Viktoria, I want to thank you so much for your time. It was really informative, and I hope it brought a lot of value to the listeners and to all the viewers. And I want to thank everyone for listening or watching, whether you're on audio platforms or whether you're on YouTube. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you for watching. Thank you for following. And we will see you all in the next episode. Thank you so much again, Viktoria.
Thank you so much, George. It was a pleasure to be here today with you.
Thank you. Take care.